Well, there's something about a story. I'm not talking about that, that favorite movie story of yours or one of your favorite fiction novels. I'm talking about when you hear someone's personal story, right? When you hear that story, there's something that encourages you. When you hear that story, it's something that sends those like goosebumps up your arm and down your spine. There's something about that story when you hear it. It just surges passion within you. It's why there was so much power in Dustin's story, a story you just heard a few moments ago. Dustin's story. You see, I remember the very first time I met Dustin. We were in this series titled, What on Earth? It was a series of, we were trying to answer one of those like big questions, the why God question. God, why is there so much pain in this world? God, why is there so much suffering in this world? God, why? Why is this world so messed up? And so many times, and maybe you've encountered this, like with the really complex questions, so many times people want to give such simplistic and trite answers to the complex. And what I desperately tried to do is not give the trite and simplistic to the complex. And so in that whole series, I was desperately trying not to. Because some things in life, there's just not a simplistic response, a simplistic answer to. And I'll never forget, I got done with one of the messages after one of the parts of the series, and all of a sudden, this guy walks up to me. I learned that his name was Dustin, and Dustin was new to the life of Tri-County Church. And in that conversation, he let me know that he wasn't sure what he believed in God. And over the course of the journey, I saw Dustin go on an epic spiritual journey, naming Jesus the subject of his life, watching him get baptized, and now he leads at our Du Bois downtown location. Something about a story that just reflects what God is doing in the lives of people. You have a story. I have a story. All of our stories are different, but all of our stories, there's power in all of our stories. And we're going to be looking at a story today of, the story includes Paul, Silas, and Timothy. And what's interesting, so many times when it comes to names like Paul, Silas, and Timothy that are attached to the Bible, so many times it's easy to take the Bible and treat the Bible like a text. But it's not. It's a story of real life people. Like Paul, Silas, and Timothy had real childhoods, and they had real family, and they had real family reunions, and they had real up moments in life and real down moments in life. They had real insecurities, and they had real passion areas. I mean, they were real life people. And so as we make through this story, try the best you can. Insert yourself into the storyline. Try to insert yourself. Maybe the thought is what if I was Silas? How would I think? If I was there, maybe if I was just part of their traveling party, if I was just with them, what emotions would well up within me? Try to just place yourself into the story today. Well, there's someone else, and I like his, I think his storyline is maybe like yours. You see, there's another guy that's going to be traveling with Paul, Silas, and Timothy. His name's Luke. And what's so fascinating about Luke is, Luke is actually writing the storyline, and he's there. You see, Luke wrote the book that we call Acts, A-C-T-S. It's all about the launch of the church. And for many of these moments, not all, but many of these moments, Luke was actually there. And for the moments he wasn't actually there, he was getting eyewitnesses. In fact, Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke, one of the stories about Jesus. And what I love about, again, Luke's perspective on writing about the story of Jesus is if you've never read Luke chapter 1 and the first 1 to 3 verses of Luke 1, you should. Because Luke heard about Jesus, then he investigated the story about Jesus by talking to eyewitnesses who were with Jesus. And that's what he wrote about in the Gospel of Luke. So now Luke is traveling with Paul, Silas, and Timothy. And you see, they were making their way through the region of Asia Minor. Israel, Jerusalem is just down south of the screen. If we could keep on going down below the screen, this is where Jerusalem would be. They're making their way through Asia Minor. As they were making their way through Asia Minor, they were just telling people about Jesus. The message was really simple. Jesus, Jesus. And as people named Jesus the subject of their life, they were launching churches, because churches are just gatherings of people who believed in Jesus, who wants to tell more people about Jesus. And so they made their way through Galatia and into Phrygia. Then they were making their way into Mysia. And what's interesting is Luke is telling about this, kind of this strategy as they were making their way through Asia Minor. You can almost tell like they had a plan. They knew where they were going, what cities they were going to stop in, what road they were going to take. Like if they had Google Maps back then, they would have had it all Google mapped out. And Luke says, hey, we got to the border between Mysia and Bithynia. He goes, we got to the border, we were about ready to go in. It's like we had our plan. We knew where we wanted to go. We knew the route. We knew where we were going to stay the night. We knew where we were going to talk with people. We knew what cities we were going to hit and what cities we weren't going to hit. And Luke goes, hey, we got to the border between Mysia and Bithynia, and God said no. God said, no, don't go into Bithynia. No reason why. Just God said no. And here's what I know. That's what God does. God works through great planning. For over a year, we've been just planning Unlock. Over a year. Countless hours of conversations. Great planning, great strategy, great vision, plan to accomplish the vision, all of that. But there was one component that we've been swirling around. It's a great component of the strategy. I mean, it's awesome. But the more we swirled around this one great component, there was something that was just saying, we're not sure. And it's always interesting because it's a great idea, but we're not sure. Thursday, I sat in my driveway with a guy on our team, and we were sitting there talking about a lot of things. And again, we've been swirling around this idea for almost a year now, and all of a sudden, it was just like God took the light bulb and just switched it on. He's like, God, that's it. Right? It's these moments where you just go, oh, okay, God, we just want to follow you. It's why I say all the time, we want to be one small step behind God. We don't want to get in front of God. Right? We want to watch God shift. We want to watch God move. We want to watch God as he leads. So we don't want to get in front of him, but we don't want to be so far back that we miss. And this is what was happening here. Paul and Silas and Timothy and Luke, I mean, they had a whole plan. They knew they were going to make their way through Galatia and Phrygia and Mysia. They were planning on going north into Bithynia, and all of a sudden God's like, no, don't go there. Why? We don't know. Sometimes God gives us a reason, sometimes God doesn't. So Paul and Silas and Timothy and Luke, they course corrected, and they went to the city of Troas, right on the coast. And then all of a sudden, Paul gets a vision. I'm not sure what this vision, how it all looked, but if you've ever had this moment where all of a sudden you just felt that stirring from within you, all of a sudden, you were seeking God's direction, and God was going, God was like, not that way. God was like, not yet. It's that pause inside. It's that uncertainty inside. And you kind of pressure test it with other people that you respect deeply on their spiritual journey and who God is in their life. And right? And so you're seeking out wisdom, but it's that pause. And in this moment, Paul sees this vision. The vision was a man standing in this region called Macedonia. And the man was standing in Macedonia saying, come this way, come to Macedonia, come to Macedonia. And see, this is what God does. Right? When you just go, God, I want to stay one small step behind you. I'm going to have a great plan. We're going to follow. But God, when you move and when you shift, we just want to move and shift with you. That's why I've talked about God behind bars the last few weeks. I don't know what the future looks like. Hear me on that. But this is what I do know. December of 2017, I contact Jake, who's the founder of God Behind Bars, and said, hey, we're interested at some point partnering with God Behind Bars. And God Behind Bars is an organization that partners with churches to launch churches in prisons. That's their whole vision. They're now in 46, 47 different prisons. They're partnering with churches all the time to help launch churches to reach everyone. So December 2017, I contact Jake and I'm like, hey, we're interested. And he goes, well, we haven't been approved to get into the state of Pennsylvania, and that's part of the process. It's at the state level. And so he goes, we'll start working on getting approved. I didn't hear from him until about 2-3 weeks ago. And he calls me and goes, we just got approved for the state of Pennsylvania. Now, I share that. And that's just how God moves. Again, I'm not prescribing what's next. Hear that. I'm not. All I know is God led. I called. Jake said, we'll start working on it. And all of a sudden, in the midst of this Unlock series, Jake gets a call that they're approved to come into the state of Pennsylvania. That's what we know right now. That's moving with God. Just moving with God. And so we're just going to continue to move with God. As he opens and shuts doors, as he shifts and moves, we're just going to continue to move. Be faithful. That's what Paul sees this image of this man saying, hey, come to Macedonia. And so guess what Paul and Silas and Luke do, and Timothy do right away? They jump on a ship. They make their way over to Macedonia, and they make their way to the city of Philippi. They come into the city of Philippi, and Luke tells us that on the Sabbath, they went outside to the city gate, to the river. And this is important because what Luke leaves out is something that Luke just assumes people understood, that they went, it's the Sabbath, they want to pray. And for there to be a synagogue in the city, the Jewish law stated that there must be 10 men, head of households present to have a synagogue. And so Luke Luke understanding the Jewish law, he just assumes that everyone else does. And so obviously there's not a synagogue in Philippi because they would have prayed there. So they're now seeking a place where they could pray. And so probably it was just common for if there wasn't a synagogue, they would find groups of people praying outside the city. So they go outside the city where they expected to find a place of prayer because there wasn't a synagogue in the city. So when they traveled about a mile and a half, and they found a group of women who were there. And Paul and Silas began to speak to these women. What did they share with them? Well, it was the message of the first church. Jesus is the subject. Jesus, who died for you. Believe in him. So they start to share with these women, and Luke tells us that one of the women, well, her name was Lydia, and he gives us a whole lot of information about this woman named Lydia. She was from the town of Thyatira. Thyatira was from this region called Lydia, and this region called Lydia was south of Mysteria, where they went to Troas to go to Philippi, okay? It's just south of there, and so Thyatira is one of these cities in that region. Thyatira was known for their indigo trade, which was a trade of this purple dye that dyed cloth purple. And in that time period, if you owned anything purple, you were either wealthy or you were part of some governmental position. The color purple was only for the elite of the elite of the elite. And Lydia was a dealer of the purple cloth. She was a wealthy business leader, and she was a worshiper of God. And when she heard Paul's message, what was the message she heard about Jesus? Luke tells us that God opened her heart, and she responded, meaning she named Jesus the subject of her life. Because again, that was the message of the first church. It was just all about Jesus. It was all about Jesus. It was all about Jesus. So she names Jesus the subject of her life. And then Paul goes, well, this is what comes next. And guess what? Here's what we know in the first church. People would name Jesus the subject of their life. And the next action out after that, the next step was baptism. And so we see this here again. When she and the members of her household were baptized, meaning that her members of her household now heard about Jesus. They named Jesus the subject of their life, and now they were baptized. That's why we celebrate baptism all the time here. Actually, in December, we're going to be doing baptisms across all of our campuses. If you haven't taken that step, and take that step. It is a celebration. It's a personal celebration for you to celebrate what Jesus has done in you and through you, but it's also a celebration for us as a church about what God is doing in the lives of people. So if you haven't taken that step, if you've named Jesus the subject of your life, that is your next step. And Lydia's entire household named Jesus the subject of their life, and they were baptized. And then she invited them to her home. Luke goes on to explain that she just didn't do some soft push invite. Like she went all in. Like she didn't give Paul and Silas and Timothy a way out. She was like, no, you have to come to my house. I'm going to feed you. You can't say no. So some time passed. We're not sure. I mean, maybe it was a day, maybe it was a week. We don't know. But a period of time passed. And then Luke goes, once, when we were going to the place of prayer, and this place of prayer would have been the same place where they would have met Lydia and the rest of the women, is this place where everyone knew in Philippi you gathered to pray because there wasn't a synagogue. When they came to this place of prayer, we were met by a female slave, important detail, who had a spirit by which she predicted the future. Now, just build into this. There's a female slave, which meant that she had masters. Luke tells us that these masters made a whole bunch of money off this female slave because she could predict the future. So there's a pretty sizable economic impact for these masters because this female slave was possessed by the spirit that could tell the future. Well, this female slave started to follow around Paul, Silas, Timothy, and Luke everywhere they went. And for days upon days, she was shouting and screaming this one thought: that these men are servants of the Most High God who are telling you the way to be saved. Not a bad thing to say, is it? Not bad at all. I mean, I think at first, Paul and Silas and Timothy and Luke were like, well, she's spot on. I mean, she might be possessed by the Spirit, but this is true. But as one day rolled into 2 days, or 3 days, or 4 days, her shouting and screaming. I mean, it was all the time she was shouting and screaming this. And then Luke gives us I think it's hilarious, by the way, such a real insight. Because all of a sudden Luke said, after days and days and days of this female slave yelling and screaming this one phrase, Luke writes, Paul got really annoyed. I'm like, that's hilarious. But you have to ask why. Why did Paul get annoyed? I mean, this is such a great statement. Why did he get annoyed? We don't know. Luke doesn't tell us. But again, put yourself in the story. I think Paul got annoyed for multiple reasons. I think he got annoyed because he has this slave girl yelling and screaming days on end. That just gets annoying. I don't care who you are. I think he gets annoyed because he realizes that this girl is a slave. And with Jesus, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, woman or man, slave nor free, because with Jesus, everyone is one. I think Paul got annoyed because instead of the attention being on Jesus, it was now on this slave girl. And probably in the background, the masters were there still collecting money. So one day, Paul just gets fed up with it, turns to the slave girl, casts the spirit out, which means she's now free on multiple levels, but it also means that these masters are pretty ticked off because their source of income is now gone like this, just gone. Well, the masters get really upset, and they grab Paul and Silas, not Timothy and Luke, which again, you got to ask the question, why did they grab Paul and Silas, not Timothy and Luke? And I think the simple answer to that is Paul and Silas were probably the spokespeople. They were the ones doing most of the teaching. So they grabbed Paul and Silas, and they're going to take them to the magistrates, the people in charge, the people with the law. And Luke tells us that the crowd joined in the attack against Paul and Silas. And the magistrates ordered them to be stripped and beaten. Luke goes on to describe this beating not just as a little weapon, but they were severely flogged. Big gashes, blood pouring out, skin ripped open, This isn't a small little like bad you. They are beaten to an inch of their life. And think about this story. One moment, they're sharing Jesus with Lydia and her whole household. One moment, Lydia is saying, I believe in Jesus, and they're baptizing everyone. They're celebrating. One moment, they're, they're back at Lydia's house, eating. Right? That's like the pinnacle moment. Or like, God, you're good. The next moment, they're being beaten to the inch of their life. But isn't that just life? One moment you're like, God, yes. The next moment you're like, God, why? One moment you're like, yeah, God, you're doing so many great things. And the next moment we're like, yeah, God, where are you? One moment, it just feels like God is just orchestrating something so incredible. And the next moment you're like, God, really? Did you allow all of this to happen? Sunday night, we had our night of worship, and it was just, for those of you who were there, it was just a movement of God in such an epic way. We got done with the night of worship, and it was just like, God just moved. God just moved, and I found myself beelining for the lobby because I just wanted to stand out there and high five people and hug people, and I was exhausted, but like I could have kept going. Like it was just like one of those moments where it's just like, God, you are good. People come flooding out of the auditorium, and the lobby. It was electric. And all of a sudden, a group of people walked up to me, and this one girl looked at me and said, will you pray for me? My brother overdosed, and I don't think he's going to make it. In the midst of this lobby, and everyone's laughing and celebrating, again, God just moved in the night of worship as we're just praying for God's immeasurably more. I found myself gathered with this group of people praying for this girl's brother. Right when I said amen with them, another couple walked up to me, and Mary shared with me that she'd gotten bad news about her sister who had been diagnosed with cancer, yet her sister didn't tell anyone. And she's telling me the story, and she goes, I don't know if she's going to make it. And I found myself praying for her and her husband, her whole family, her sister. I'm just praying in the midst of the lobby. The lobby's electric, and my heart is aching to find out the next day that her sister passed away. Tuesday morning, I wake up, and I just ask a simple question. I go, how can I pray for all of you? I put it out on social media. I said, leave a comment below or direct message me. And the vast majority of people direct messaged me. And in the midst of like, God, you're moving in such incredible ways. Someone asked for prayers for family reconciliation, prayers for car and finances. A great grandmother asking for prayers for her grandson and court issues. A mother asking for prayers for her daughter's health. She has a degenerative disease. Someone asked for prayers for acceptance. Some longtime friends of my wife and I, and we know this couple so well. And he has cancer and dementia, and she's just asking for us to pray. Someone asked for prayer for depression because he lost his mom. Someone asking for prayers because of the stress that comes with her job because of unreal expectations. A mom asking for prayer for her son that he goes to rehab. A mother who lost her adult daughter just asking her for prayer as she grieves the loss of her. Prayers for reoccurring health issues. Prayer from a wife whose husband went to jail and she's just trying to figure out what life looks like now. Someone asking just prayers for hope. Someone asking for prayers for her wife as they continue to face uncertain health issues that have been going on for a long, long, long time. Prayers for family and marriage reconciliation. Prayers for resentment to be taken away. Prayers for a granddaughter. Prayers for someone whose life is just a complete mess. Prayers for a family that's divided, leaving this person feeling lost and alone. And I could keep going. I could just keep going. The question is, who is God? Who is God? on the mountaintops and who is God in the darkest of valleys. And after Paul and Silas were beaten severely, they were taken to jail, their feet were put in stocks, and they were left there. And Luke tells us around midnight, they were praying and singing. They were praying. They kept their eyes locked in on God. And I just want you to know, if you're going through the valley, God sometimes just says, you're going to have to go through the valley. The question is, are you going to keep your eyes locked in on God? Are you going to keep focused on God even in the darkest moments of your life? And Paul and Silas just locked in on God. And they kept their eyes focused on God, and they prayed and they worshiped. They prayed and they sang songs of praise. And guess what? People were listening. Do you realize that? People are always watching us. And it's easy to say, yay, God, on the mountaintops. But I'm just telling you, your impact in this world, your impact on social media, your impact, people want to see who God is to you in the darkest moments of your life. Because that's where hope is sourced. And people are looking for hope. I'm just telling you, people are watching, listening, seeing who God is in your valley. And Paul and Silas were worshiping, and people were listening. And then all of a sudden, this earthquake shakes the foundation of the jail. The doors come flying off the hinges. There's shackles, and the stocks break apart. The jailer wakes up. He was asleep. He wakes up, and I think, again, we don't know, but I think the jailer fell asleep listening to Paul and Silas singing. And when he wakes up, he fears for his life because he thinks all the prisoners are gone. He grabs his sword to end his life, and Paul screams out at him, "Don't harm yourself. We are all here. We could have ran for it. We could have broken for it. We could have made our way out, but we're all here." The jailer grabs a lantern, a torch, comes in to see, and when he comes in and he sees them all there again, we don't know this for sure, but I think the jailer fell asleep listening to these two Christ followers sing. And he comes in and he goes, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" This is why it's so important. Hey, Christ followers, listen to this. This is so important. When you keep your eyes focused on God, even through the darkest moments, and when people see that faith, when they see that hope, they want it. And he said, "Sirs, what must I do? What must I do to be saved?" And I think Paul gets this big smile because, there's nothing you have to do. He goes, just believe. Believe in Jesus. He did everything. Believe in Jesus, and you will be saved. You and your whole household. You and your whole household. And then Luke records for us these three actions. And I think the order of these three actions I think they're hilarious, by the way, because I would have wished that 1 and 2 got reversed. But what Luke records from us, and in this moment, the jailer gathers his whole family, his whole household together. And the first action was Paul and Silas told his whole household about Jesus. That was the first action. Then Luke tells us that the second action, after they tell them all about Jesus, the second action is a whole household started to clean up all of their wounds. Think about that. Wouldn't you want those two reversed? I mean, blood's caked on all over your body. I mean, gaping wounds on your body. I mean, let's just be real. Put yourself in the story. All of a sudden, you get rescued. You're like, yay! Wouldn't the natural human response be, hey, do you have some cotton swabs first, right? Do you have some Neosporin? I got some, right? And then we'll tell you about Jesus. I think, again, we don't know this. I think the jailer tried to convince him, hey, let us clean up your wounds. And I think Paul and Silas were like, no. We want to tell you about Jesus. Jesus came first. Then they helped clean up all of their wounds. Remember, beaten severely. The third thing, you know what they did? What happened in their early church? When you name Jesus the subject of your life, you know what comes next? They baptized them. And after they baptized the jailer and his whole household, guess what? The jailer brought him back into the house and set a meal before them. Food was a common point in the early church. And he was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. The sun rose, the magistrates let Paul and Silas go, and when they let them go, guess where Paul and Silas and Timothy and Luke head? To Lydia's house, where they met with the brothers and sisters and encouraged them. You see, I think about the launch of the church in the city of Philippi. If you've never read the letter to the church in Philippi, we call it Philippians, you should read it. And you should read it by going back to Acts 16, the story we just looked at. And maybe you've never put Acts 16 with Philippians. You should. Because the launch of the church started with a businesswoman. Most scholars believe that the slave girl, when Paul healed her from the spirit, right, she was now free. That she was part of this movement, and the jailer. Think about this storyline. The church in Philippi, businesswoman, a slave girl, and a jailer. That was the launch of the church. It's a story of Tri-County Church, an unconventional church filled with unconventional people, following an unconventional God that demonstrated his unconventional generosity by giving his son so we could experience his unconventional love and grace for everyone. I've said this multiple times. Unlock's not about money. It's not about money. It's about God's movement to reach the immeasurably more. This week, I was getting ready for my message. Service was about ready to start. I headed to my mailbox, and I grabbed a stack of mail, and this card was in my box. And this person wrote, "I'm so thankful that you've opened a Tri-County church in Punxsutawney. I am now going to church again after quite a while. Thank you to all who made this happen." You see, Unlock is about our step of faith to experience God's immeasurably more. It's about our step of faith. Now to him, God, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, who is able to do immeasurably more than we could ever dream of or imagine. But it's according to his power that's at work within you, within you, within you, within me. To experience his immeasurably more, you got to lean into his power. And that's going to require a step of faith. And it's to glory, to his glory, his honor, his worship, his praise. In the church, a gathering of people. And through Christ Jesus, to all generations, the youngest to the oldest, forever and ever. and ever. Amen. The word amen simply means, so be it. Church, let's be that church. Let's be that church. Let's be that church that anticipates and expects God's immeasurably more.